mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. The complexion of his face looked a bit jaundiced and leather-worn, his black hair combed back, and he spoke with a slight accent, but his English easily understandable. His clothing looked presentable, perhaps for someone who was a day laborer. The man came to the 12:15 Healing Eucharist last week and fully participated. Afterwards, he asked if the church might have some opportunities for him for employment, odd jobs. He said his name was Joseph, a name meaning adding to. Joseph, adding to. He began to share a bit of his story. He'd been in New York, where he had friends, but then wound up in Louisiana looking for employment, and then last week in Atlanta, still looking for work. Joseph told us he came to America following the mythological dream, land of opportunity, prosperity, but instead he found homelessness and struggle. More than anything, he wanted to go home to Bethlehem, where homelessness, he said, was non-existent. I couldn't resist asking him about living in a city that's surrounded by a wall, but he didn't answer. Joseph said if he could get to New York City, where he had friends, he would be able to work, save up enough money, and then go home. I paused for a few seconds and asked him if he would like a Greyhound bus ticket to New York City. He frowned a bit and said, "No, I don't like Greyhound. It takes too long and they make too many stops." Well, a church member was there, and she offered Joseph to Toco Hills to see if he could get a hot meal. Because at that time, it seemed as though he was agitated. He said he was homeless, most likely hungry, and someone offered him a mode of transportation that was not acceptable for him. So I pulled the church member aside and I asked that they ask Joseph about another bus, a different bus company that might be acceptable. So they went to Toco Hills, but unfortunately they had not yet started to serve lunch, and so they came back to the church office. And Joseph now had a name, Panda New York Bus. So I said, "Great. Would you like a ticket?" He said yes. So I went online, put in the name, Joseph, but then I needed a last name, and I thought perhaps he may need an ID card to get on the bus. So I asked him, and he said he didn't have identification. And he paused about giving his last name. Finally, he said his last name is Isaac. Isaac, which means laughter. So I didn't ask him, well, how are you going to get back to Bethlehem with no ID? I just thought, okay. He's an immigrant. He's afraid. He doesn't want to let me know, or anyone else most likely, that he has identification, which was fine. So I finished the information online, but I thought, okay, with no ID, maybe they won't let him on the bus. So I went the next step, called the office there, and they said, well, just write a letter using your church letterhead to verify this whole situation, and we'll let him on the bus. So I handed Joseph an envelope that had the letter and the ticket so he could ride the bus to New York. The church member walked with him out of the building, and we blessed one another. So I thought, what a curious thing to happen 1 week from Christmas Day. A man named Joseph Isaac showed up looking for work, but ultimately wanted a ticket to New York where he had friends so he could work and save money and go home to Bethlehem, the city of David. The situation in the West Bank, not a deterrent. He knew life there to be better than the life he'd found in America. Joseph Isaac, two names together, meaning adding laughter. Adding laughter, came by St. Bartholomew's looking for a way home. The Christmas story is about finding a way home. Joseph Isaac was captivated by a dream of opportunity that did not come to fruition. The light that brought him here turned to darkness. At some point in our lives, we join the people referenced in the reading from Isaiah, a people walking in darkness. They were oppressed by the Assyrian government. If we are not oppressed by the government, we find ourselves burdened, worried, troubled by many things that create a shadow of nighttime that clouds our thinking and being. Situations that could not be predicted crop up, interrupting business as usual. This is what happened to Joseph and Mary. They'd heard from the angel, and they knew that they had been chosen for something spectacular, but then the government stepped in, and they had to leave their home to follow the emperor's decree to register, sign up, give an account of their presence and their being. There were no exceptions allowed. No grace granted toward Mary, a woman nearing time for delivery. We can only imagine the Holy Family traveling by foot. Maybe there was a donkey. The story doesn't tell us so. We hope Mary didn't have to walk all of those approximately 90 miles to register, nearing the time to give birth. A shadow fell over their lives as they were temporarily uprooted, and when they arrived, no lodging available. In this familiar story, we find the power of the Roman government in Syria over the residents of Nazareth who were helpless. Each person was called to return to their home of origin, and for Joseph, this was the city of David, also known as Bethlehem, the place King David first united Israel and Judah, bringing about reconciliation. Joseph is part of this lineage, and in that city of all places, Jesus is born. Luke describes it in a way that is straightforward and simple. And she, Mary, gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in bands of cloth and laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. The shadow of an arduous journey took them to a place where the light of the world would emerge, the city of David. Like a magnet, the shepherds, although initially frightened by the angels, would be driven to follow their direction and make their way to Bethlehem. And we know the shepherds were outcast, but they will be the ones to see first and proclaim the good news of Jesus' birth, not the emperor, not the governor, but the lowly. The lowly. And after they bear witness, they praise God and return home. Christmas is about home. Yes, there is home where we find a place that we reside, home with friends and family, memories that carry us back to home, and memories made each day that will become home. However, the home of Christmas is mystical in nature, tied to a story that was first part of oral history before being captured by scribes. The birth of Jesus attracts the unlikely at first, but in time we will see the religious leaders and Gentiles drawn to Jesus as well. And tonight we come home to Jesus. Poet John Betjeman includes this portion in his poem entitled Christmas. And is it true? And is it true, this most tremendous tale of all, seen in a stained glass window's hue, a baby in an ox's stall? The maker of the stars and sea, become a child on earth for me, for you? No love that in a family dwells, no caroling in frosty air, nor all the steeples shaking bells can with this simple human truth compare, that God was man in Palestine and lives today in bread and wine. I invite you to pay close attention when you later speak the words of the post-communion prayer, which begin this way. God of all, we give you thanks and praise that when we were still far off, you met us in your Son and brought us home. When we were still far off, God gave us Jesus. So let us reclaim Jesus this night through word, prayer, song, and sacrament. And let us remember Joseph Isaac and add holy laughter to Christmastide.